war allied with India, Pakistan's historical adversary. The Pakistani government believes that Taliban insurgents are the only card it has.
All of that available online at cspan.org in our video library. We're leaving this now. The U.S. House coming in for legislative work. They'll finish up work on a bill that repeals funding for the construction of school-based health care centers. Also a bill that will block federal funding of abortions. Live coverage of the House now on C-SPAN.
Let us pray. God of peace, who called all people from every nation to seek reconciliation with each other for the good of creation, inspire in us the will to persevere through moments of conflict to seek common ground. Bless this country and all its leaders in the continued fulfillment of the vision set forth in July of 1776, that all people are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. During this session of the 112th Congress, in this the People's House, may the hearts of these duly elected representatives be blessed with the integrity of purpose and the steadfast commitment to seek and serve the people of the United States of America for the betterment of this country and the world. We ask this all in the name of the one God, the God of all nations. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof, and pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance will be led today by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Johnson.
Join with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 one-minute requests on each side. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, the average for a gallon of gas in Ohio is over $4 a gallon, and in eastern and southeast Ohio, this is particularly hard on families who live in rural areas. Farmers, ranchers, seniors, working families who have limited means of transportation, these high gas prices are having a negative impact on everyone. The higher gas prices go, the more of an impact it has on our economy and on our chances for real economic recovery. Small business owners are watching money they could otherwise invest in their businesses go to paying for fuel. And working families are anxiously redoing their budgets to account for higher fuel costs and looking for ways to cut back. We're blessed with an abundance of natural resources in Ohio. We're one of the highest coal-producing areas, and with the Marcellus Shale right next door in West Virginia, we're poised to make an enormous contribution to making America self-sufficient in energy. We need an energy strategy that will help us become energy self-sufficient so we stop relying on other countries to meet our energy needs. Now is the time to levy a moratorium on developing American energy resources. Let's open up our American resources and put our country on the path to ensuring our energy security instead of continuing to rely on foreign sources for energy. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
To address the House.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today in opposition to H.R. 3 and to remind my colleagues of two key dates. January 20th, 2011, the day H.R. 3 was introduced. Just 3 months ago, the authors of this extremist, offensive bill introduced a version of H.R. 3 that would have redefined rape and incest. They don't want us to remember. We cannot forget. 173 members of Congress signed their names to a bill that would have redefined rape to exclude women who are unconscious, mentally disabled, or forced into sex by threat. The authors of this bill would also like us to forget another important date, January 22nd, 1973. On that day, the Supreme Court ruled that women have the right to make their own decisions about their own bodies and their own lives. But we will not forget that date, and we will not forget the 173 members of this body who want to redefine rape and incest and will not turn back the clock to a time when women could not make their own choices and access vital care. We will not forget, we will not go back, and we must not pass H.R. 3. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, Osama bin Laden has met his maker, and we appreciate the Navy SEALs in arranging the meeting. But Pakistan gives us some concern. It seems like Pakistan might be playing both sides, and they have a lot of explaining to do. For all these years, we've believed that Osama bin Laden was on the run, living in a cave. But apparently, Satan's pawn has been living for years in a $1 million compound just yards away from the Pakistani military base. But Pakistan claims no knowledge of Osama bin Laden's whereabouts. I just don't buy it. I've introduced a bill that would require Congress and the American people to get a full understanding of what Pakistan knew about bin Laden's whereabouts and when they knew it before we give them any more American money. Congress has already appropriated $3 billion in aid to Pakistan for this year. And unless Pakistan can prove that they were not providing sanctuary for America's #1 enemy, they should not receive any American aid. And that's just the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts rise? Gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the majority's attempt to undermine a woman's right to choose, a right that is fundamental to a woman's freedom. H.R. 3 would raise taxes on any American whose employer-sponsored health care plan provides coverage for an abortion. It eliminates Americans' right to use their own funds in health savings accounts for a legal abortion unless they can prove to the IRS that they were victims of rape or incest. This legislation allows a hospital to refuse to perform an emergency abortion even if a woman would die without it. It would allow doctors to refuse abortion services even if a pregnancy threatens a woman's health. And this law makes radical changes to the way we treat survivors of rape and even how we define rape. My colleagues say that they are for no new taxes and for preserving life, but this legislation belies that claim. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the news that Osama bin Laden had been killed by U.S. forces on Sunday brought reassurance to many around the world that justice had finally been served. A man responsible for the deaths of thousands of innocent people of all races and religions had been located and eliminated. However, not everyone saw it the same way. Ismail Haniyeh, leader of Hamas in Gaza, called bin Laden a sheikh and said, quote, "We condemn the assassination and the killing of an Arab holy warrior," end quote. This comes the same week that Palestinian political parties Hamas and Fatah have reconciled and formed a unity government. How can the United States provide aid to a unity government if one of its most important leaders praises a mass murderer? How can Israel negotiate treaties with a government composed of a party that is actively seeking its destruction? There cannot be true peace as long as Hamas holds up Osama bin Laden and other terrorists as heroes. The Palestinian people must recognize that hatred and terrorism will never bring them true peace and true independence. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor and recognize the rich history of the Jewish American experience in the United States as we mark Jewish American Heritage Month. It is fitting that the words of the Jewish American poet Emma Lazarus are immortalized on the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Because here in the United States we recognize the powerful impact of the Jewish American experience. People who escaped persecution, arrived here as immigrants, and prospered. Jewish Americans formed strong communities, became involved in their neighborhoods, and have made lasting contributions to our country. Jewish Americans represent some of this country and indeed the world's foremost innovators in health and science, business and industry, politics and government, arts and culture. This spirit is also found in many Jewish Americans who work tirelessly to seek a better life for future generations. In celebrating the many milestones of the Jewish Americans this month, we honor the lives, work, and rich history of Jewish Americans throughout our nation. And that's why this month we take time to remember the unique Jewish American identity steeped in history and faith and their tremendously important contributions to our nation. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to bring attention to the plentiful natural gas reserves that we have in the United States. Many of my colleagues may not be aware of two studies which recently highlighted the abundance of this clean-burning domestic fuel source, which holds so much promise. The first study I'd like to draw attention to is the Energy Information Administration's Energy Outlook for 2011, which analyzes energy production, consumption, technology, and market supply and demand and the direction those trends may take in the future. The outlook anticipates strong growth in the natural gas development and consumption because of development of shale gas resources. The outlook notes that growth in natural gas would not be permissible but for the combination of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing technologies which have made shale gas economical to produce. The outlook finds that hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling have led to an average annual growth rate of 48% during the time period from 2006 to 2010. The second study I'd like to mention is the American Gas Association's Potential Gas Committee 2010 biennial report. Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this point, I yield the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise? Gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 3, which the House will vote on later today. After voting last month to end Medicare as we know it for seniors, today the majority is attacking the women's reproductive freedom. For the last 3 months, we have watched as the majority party has consistently attacked the right of women to receive comprehensive health care, and today is no different. H.R. 3 has outrageous provisions that would end comprehensive private health insurance coverage and reduce women's access to abortion care in many ways. H.R. 3 manipulates the tax code to restrict access to comprehensive care. The bill raises taxes on individuals and small businesses with insurance plans that cover abortion, forcing them to drop their health insurance plans. H.R. 3 is an unprecedented attempt to deny access to full reproductive care. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this radical anti-choice bill. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise? The gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to H.R. 3. This deceptively titled legislation is nothing more than an assault on women's access to health care. If enacted, this legislation would severely curtail women's access to reproductive health care services. What would it do? It would impose tax penalties on women. It would narrow already the restrictive areas that the Hyde Amendment has dealt with. And further, what I find most alarming, it would attack the coverage for federal employees, including women who serve in the military. Where is all of our applause now? The Hyde Amendment clearly states that no taxpayer dollars are to be used for abortion care and has narrowly provided exceptions that state for rape, incest, and health complications that arise from pregnancy, which would put a mother's life in danger. Are we against that? I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill, resoundingly no on H.R. 3. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise?
Madam Speaker, I request permission to address the House, revise and extend, and to provide extraneous material.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today in honor of the long and productive life of Harold J. Schnitzer. Harold was a skilled businessman who, together with his wife Arlene Director Schnitzer, established and later with his son Jordan, grew one of the largest privately owned real estate companies in the western United States. But this quiet, thoughtful, modest man was a civic leader, a philanthropist for the arts, education, and culture in Oregon. I personally experienced his kindness to a young man interested in public service. He continued to be generous with his opinions and advice, a story I know was repeated many times. His many contributions to our community will be enjoyed for generations to come. We honor his life even as we mourn his passing and extend our condolences to his wife of 62 years, Arlene, son Jordan, his extended family, and countless friends.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise? The gentleman is recognized.
The people in Michigan are clear. Our #1 priority is jobs. And yet the Republican majority here in Washington is once again ignoring the economy and pushing a bill that raises taxes and attacks women's health care choices. Current law already prohibits federal funds from covering abortion services, and it has for 30 years. Now Republicans want to stop private insurers from offering coverage, and they want to ban women from purchasing a comprehensive health care plan with their own money. H.R. 3 is not about taxpayer funding, and it's certainly not about reducing the deficit. It is an extreme plan that will raise taxes on any person or business that buys insurance that includes abortion coverage. That's right. If a small business wants to treat women equally and guarantee them access to legal health care services paid for with their own money, that business will pay higher taxes. Do not be fooled about talk about taxpayer funding. This bill is harmful to women's health. It undermines the right to choose, and I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill later today. I yield back.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Connecticut rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise this morning with a question, which is, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Like all 434 of my colleagues, I just spent 2 weeks at home listening to my constituents, and I heard one message. Do everything you can. Don't let a second go by. Work to restore jobs in this country, improve the economy. And I get down here on Monday, and what did we do this week? We voted in this chamber to eliminate funding for school-based health centers, funding for kids who don't have any other way to see a doctor. Today, thanks to the Republican majority, we will vote to try to scale back the right of women to have access to reproductive health care. And later on this week, we're going to take up measures that will keep the gravy train flowing to the oil companies. The $4 billion in our taxpayer money that goes to companies like ExxonMobil, which last week reported $10 billion in profits. I'm glad ExxonMobil is making money, but you know what? They don't need ours. So what are we doing? When is the Republican majority going to get serious about the one thing that my constituents care about, jobs? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise? The gentlelady is recognized.
I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 3. You know, Republicans say that they're for smaller government, but that ends when it comes to women. In order to curtail women's reproductive rights, it isn't enough to prevent the public dollars from helping poor women end a dangerous or unplanned pregnancy. That's already the law. No public money for abortions. But now they're going to raise taxes on small businesses, telling them that if they offer a health plan for men or women that has the gall to cover abortions, and by the way, that's about 90% of plans that cover all legal procedures, then they can no longer get a tax break for offering such a plan. Raising taxes on businesses that offer comprehensive health plans, that's the bill that's up today. Now even private money of individuals and businesses, of men and women, will now face a new tax. So much for small government and lower taxes that the Republicans talk about, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise? The gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in opposition to H.R. 3, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act. First of all, to imply that taxpayers fund abortions today is a lie. No, not one penny can be spent on abortions because of the Hyde Amendment, which passed on September 30th, 1976. What this bill does is to play reproductive roulette with the tax code. Under H.R. 3, if someone buys private insurance that includes coverage for abortions, they will be taxed. If someone buys private insurance, using your own money, obviously, that doesn't include coverage for abortions, then they can deduct the cost of the health plan from their taxes. This would turn our tax collection agency into a health care policing agency. I support a woman's right to opt for or against abortion. The decision is private. It's a matter of faith. It's a matter of conscience, and our Constitution recognizes this. Make no mistake, this is an attack on women's health, and it's a giant step back for the equality we've worked so hard to achieve. This is wrong, this is dangerous, and the House should oppose it.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise? Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I also rise in strong opposition to H.R. 3. Our first priorities here in the House of Representatives must be helping foster job creation and supporting middle-class families. Yet more than 4 months into this Congress, we have not considered one bill, not one bill, that would achieve these goals. Instead, we have before us today H.R. 3, one of the centerpieces of the Republican agenda, and it would limit the health care choices of women. Now, even if all it did is what the name implies, to prohibit federal subsidies for abortion, it would be redundant, unnecessary, and misguided, but it's much worse than that. In truth, it's an unprecedented and extreme attempt to limit health insurance coverage for American women, to raise taxes on small businesses, to infringe on the legally protected right of American servicewomen, to make this legal, constitutionally protected medical procedure inaccessible to women. I oppose H.R. 3 and urge my colleagues to vote no, and I urge the majority to get to work helping Americans to get to work.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It appears that there are some in this body who believe that if you state a falsehood often enough, people will believe that it's the truth. That's what the bill before us is all about. It's an attempt to legislate something that isn't. The proponents of H.R. 3 want you to believe that abortion is rampant in America and we spend zillions of federal dollars a year, and this bill will stop the use of those federal funds. This is a crock of baloney. Everyone in this House knows that federal funds are not spent on abortions. It's been the law of this land for the last 35 years. H.R. 3 will have no effect, zero nada, on the use of federal funds for abortion service in America because it's a law under which we are already operating. But what H.R. 3 will do is drastically codify an untruth. It will reach into the pockets of women and prevent them from using their own money, their own private money, on purchasing health care insurance which covers abortion services. This is a mass intrusion into the privacy lives of people and to businesses. It should be defeated.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York rise? Gentlelady is recognized.
Later today, the House will continue its extreme assault on women's health. H.R. 3 would prevent small businesses and families from receiving tax credits for private insurance coverage that includes safe and legal health procedures, allow hospitals to deny life-saving care to women, if audited, potentially require victims to prove to the IRS agents they were raped. Most troubling, in the report accompanying the bill, radical Republicans want to limit the exception for rape victims who can access full legal health services to only forcible rape victims. This bill to limit women's health services is a shameful distraction from the public's top priority, creating jobs.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With gas prices in my district in Louisville, Kentucky hitting $4 as they are all over the country, ExxonMobil just reported earnings of $10.7 billion for the quarter, almost 70% higher than last week. BP, Conoco, Shell, and Chevron also reported huge increases in profits, and we're still giving them taxpayer-financed subsidies. Last week, the chairman of the Budget Committee said he thinks we ought to do away with these subsidies, and yet he and the rest of the Republican majority are pushing a budget that not only sustains those giveaways to oil companies, but also would lower taxes for billionaires, all at the expense of our seniors, our students, and our struggling families who are paying that $4 a gallon all over the country. We ought to do away with these subsidies, and the Democrats have introduced the Big Oil Welfare Repeal Act to do just that. If we're serious about deficit reduction and equity in this country and fairness, we will pass the Big Oil Welfare Repeal Act, and we will help to begin to return this country to having an economy that works for everybody and not just for ExxonMobil. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 3, which has nothing to do with taxpayer funding of abortion.
Right or wrong, federal funding for abortion hasn't been allowed for more than 3 decades. Instead, H.R. 3 has everything to do with infringing on the constitutionally protected right to an abortion that has been the law of the land for 38 years. For years, we've been listening to Republicans call for smaller government, less regulation, fewer taxes. But this bill represents the opposite of these values. It's more regulation on business, more regulation on health care decisions that should be left up to women and their doctors. It's more taxes on small business, more taxes on women, and it's more control by anti-choice extremists in Washington. Finally, this bill isn't about job creation either. Instead, it's about bringing up divisive legislation that has no hope of becoming law in order to divide and distract the American people. It's been 4 months, and still the new majority here hasn't brought a serious bill about job creation to this floor for a vote. It's time to get back to the work of putting Americans back to work. Let's do that. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call for House Resolution 237 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 33, House Resolution 237. Resolved, that upon the adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill, H.R. 3, to prohibit taxpayer-funded abortions and to provide for conscience protections and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. In lieu of the amendment and the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on the Judiciary, now printed in the bill, the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended to final passage without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate with 40 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary, 10 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means, and 10 minutes equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and 2, 1 motion to recommit with or without instructions.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 hour.
For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Slaughter, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
House Resolution 237 provides for a closed rule for consideration of H.R. 3. The rule provides for ample debate on this bill and gives members of both the minority and the majority the opportunity to participate in the debate. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. For the past 30 years, we've used a patchwork system of clauses and amendments to protect American tax dollars from being used to pay for abortions. Every year, Congress has to attach a series of amendments to appropriation bills specifically stating that funds spent in that legislation may not be used for elective abortions. Every year, these amendments pass. These amendments pass, Madam Speaker, because members of Congress know and recognize the fact that the vast majority of Americans do not want their hard-earned money to be spent for abortions of innocent unborn lives. In 2010, the Zagby-O'Leary poll found that 77% of Americans believe that federal funds should never be used to pay for abortions or should only be used to save the life of a mother. 77%, Madam Speaker. This number proves that even people who support a woman's right to choose still believe that tax dollars should not pay for that choice. Clearly, the time has come to move beyond this piecemeal approach and reform the way our nation addresses this very important and sensitive issue. H.R. 3 simply codifies and makes permanently the policies that currently rely upon regular reapproval of Congress. Among the riders made permanent to H.R. 3 are the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits funding for elective abortion coverage through any program funded through the annual Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriation Act. The Helms Amendment, which prohibits funding for abortion as a method of family planning overseas. The Smith Federal Employee Health Benefit Plan Amendment, which prohibits funding for elected abortion coverage for federal employees. The Dornan Amendment, which prohibits the use of congressionally appropriated funds for abortion in the District of Columbia. The Hyde-Weldon Conscience Clause, which ensures that recipients of federal funding do not discriminate against doctors, nurses, hospitals, because they do not pay for or cover or refer for abortions. Madam Speaker, a woman's right to choose can be a divisive issue that splits American people down the middle. However, we aren't talking about a 50-50 issue. We're talking about 77%. It's clearly a majority. Just like Americans on both sides of the aisle believe that tax dollars shouldn't go to pay for abortions, so do the members of Congress from both parties. There are 227 bipartisan co-sponsors of H.R. 3. I'm proud to be one of those co-sponsors. H.R. 3 will ensure American taxpayers are not forced to fund what many consider the destruction of innocent human life through abortion on demand. The No Taxpayer Funding Abortion Act will establish a government-wide statutory prohibition on funding abortion or insurance coverage that includes abortion. This comprehensive approach will reduce the need for numerous separate abortion funding riders. It eliminates the abortion-related amendments to appropriation bills, bills that the rules of the House remind us aren't even supposed to legislate through amendments. It ensures that all federal programs are subject to this important safeguard. Once again, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this rule and underlying legislation. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the underlying reservation bill and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida reserves the balance of his time. The gentlelady from New York.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have had many misnamed bills, euphemistically called almost anything to try to make some kind of point, but this one does not have a thing in the world to do with restricting federal money use in abortions. That has not been done for 30 years. This bill actually says let's try to make sure that no insurance companies in the country will ever cover them again, no matter what the circumstances. With no other medical procedure would we be even standing here talking about what's best for American citizens. In all my years in Congress, I have never had to debate a bill about how and when a patient can receive an appendectomy, nor a bill about how a patient can receive corrective surgery, nor is it legal to have a vasectomy. Yet here we are today, debating a bill that will reach far beyond the status quo and place restrictions on the constitutionally protected right to access for reproductive health care. In the case of abortion, it has been decided with this bill that they can dictate how and when a woman is allowed to receive reproductive health care. In part because women are instinctual nurturers, the decision about whether or not to have an abortion is one of the most personal and important decisions that they will ever make. In making this decision, a woman should be free to consult with whomever she pleases, whether it be her doctor, her spouse, her family, a parent, confidant, or religious advisor. But a woman should never be forced to adhere to the extreme restrictions placed upon her by members of Congress. I've served in 3 legislatures, and every one of them was always men in blue suits who knew very little about the life-altering experience of pregnancy and birth, who demanded this kind of action. I've often spoken in support of a woman's right to access an abortion, and had many people, including some of my own constituents, who disagree with me, and that's fine. They have never, however, tried by law to enforce upon me what they themselves believe. Once I was at a meeting in my district, and I was asked by a man who was strongly opposed to a woman's right to choose what should be done about that, and my response to him was simple and personal and still applies today. I asked him that if, God forbid, he ever finds himself in a difficult position of having to decide whether or not his wife needed to have an abortion, either because the health of the fetus or the mother was in danger, or because of it, or other personal or private matter, is he willing to say to people gathered in the hospital and during discussion, no decision can be made until Louis Slaughter gets here, because Congress will make that decision for him. The right to an abortion is already a procedure that is carefully regulated in the decision of Roe v. Wade. Today's legislation would go far beyond the status quo and further restrict access in an attempt to make it practically impossible to receive an abortion under these laws. Today's bill changes the tax system. Now, this is an important point. I want you to understand this, for private health care plans that offer abortion coverage to small businesses and individuals, as most of them do. If passed into law, this bill would pressure private health insurance plans to stop offering that coverage altogether. And that, Madam Speaker, is the purpose of this bill. In addition, and most egregiously, today's legislation opens the door to the IRS audits of rape and incest survivors to prove that they followed the law when paying for an abortion. Do we do this with anything else? I'm absolutely astonished to place this kind of burden on a medical procedure. It's been designed specifically to chip away at the rights of women. Most egregiously, this bill has put a dangerous provision into the committee report that accompanies this bill. Please listen up. You need to know what this says in this report language, which is as important as the bill itself. That report language states that the legislation is intended to prohibit the use of federal money to subsidize abortions in cases of statutory rape. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the rape of a child too young to give consent. Now, think about that for a moment. This bill forbids any money being used to help that child over that. It's not bad enough that they have been raped or that they are victims of incest. Now we're telling them that they have to keep records so that they can prove to the IRS that they followed the law. That is what I know and what I think about when I made the statement earlier this spring about show me your papers. And that is precisely what this bill is asking to do. If this bill becomes law, think about the statutory rape. Think about your children. Think about other people's children. If it becomes law, the committee report will become one of the documents relied upon by the courts when deciding the cases about abortion. With a committee report in hand, a future justice would have the document they need to further restrict access to abortions for victims of rape and incest. If this sounds extreme, believe me, it is. We, like our nation's founders, know that each individual is entitled to his or her beliefs. But no matter how strongly we believe them, we should not be allowed to force them upon others as we wish. Yet placing an ideology upon others and restricting their choices when it comes to reproductive health is the spirit behind today's legislation and one of the many reasons why it should be stopped. As we all know, at the time of our nation's founding, the ideal of equal rights and freedoms was far from realized. In fact, was not even of much concern. African Americans were property. Women could not vote or own anything, and indeed, a pregnant woman who was widowed could find that her child had been willed away from her by her husband, who had all the rights. Native Americans were pushed off their land and out of our society. With great struggle, and certainly I know the struggle for women's rights because of what happened in my own district, where that struggle began. Over time, we've righted many of these wrongs, and as a nation, we've come to believe that men and women of every color and creed are created equal, that we are all entitled to the rights and individual freedoms at the core of our nation's ideals. Today's proposed legislation upends the principle of equal rights and freedom by placing severe restrictions on the constitutionally protected right to an abortion. Instead of crafting legislation to restrict a woman's right to safe, secure reproductive health, this Congress should respect the rights of women and uphold their constitutionally protected rights. I strongly urge my colleagues to vote no on today's rule and the underlying bill, which may be the most egregious that comes to the floor this year. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my colleague, Dr. Gingrey of Georgia.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Florida for yielding. I do rise in very strong support of this rule, as well as the underlying bill, H.R. 3, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act. I would also like to commend our colleague from New Jersey, Representative Chris Smith, for his leadership on this legislation and his steadfast pro-life stance throughout his tenure in Congress. As a practicing OB/GYN physician for nearly 30 years, I believe that all life is sacred. The issue of abortion is a very personal issue for me, as it is for many people across the country and many members of this body. However, that is not why we are on the House floor today considering this legislation. Instead, we are here to answer one simple question. Should American tax dollars be used to fund abortions? When an elective choice can decide life and death, should the federal government be allowed to use tax dollars to pay for that choice? Madam Speaker, H.R. 3 is a bill that seeks to set right what the last Congress got wrong, to ensure that abortions are not funded by taxpayer dollars. At its very base level, H.R. 3 simply codifies the Hyde Amendment, which has been enacted in some form or another as an appropriation rider since fiscal year 1976. Through this legislation today, we will make permanent the prohibition on federal funding for abortions, thereby eliminating the inherent vulnerability that riders like the Hyde Amendment face as part of the annual appropriation process. Furthermore, H.R. 3 codifies the Hyde Dr. Dave Weldon conscience clause that has protected health care providers from discrimination by state and local governments for simply refusing to provide, to pay for, or even refer for abortion. So additionally, H.R. 3 will allow those health care providers who choose not to perform abortions legal recourse if they face overt discrimination, as they often do. Madam Speaker, H.R. 3 also prevents federal funds being used for tax credits that subsidize health insurance coverage that includes elective abortion through the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare. One of the many problems with this law, Obamacare, is that there's no statutory language prohibiting premium assistance from being used for abortions, despite many efforts of House and Senate Republicans during the last Congress. H.R. 3 provides the assurance that our taxpayer dollars will not be used in any form of federal subsidies for abortion coverage. So, Madam Speaker, as a father and an OB/GYN physician who has delivered over 5,000 babies, I will be voting to ensure that the federal government does not use taxpayer dollars for any elective abortion. I ask all my colleagues to support this rule, as well as the underlying bill, H.R. 3. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, and I thank the gentleman for yielding.
The gentlelady from New York.
Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Davis.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise in vehement opposition to this cruel and dangerous legislation, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act. This extreme bill's title belies its true intent to go far beyond current law and comprehensively curtail women's health care. You know, this bill isn't just about taxpayer funding for abortion. It is a comprehensive attack on women's lives. We hear all the time. We hear that people want government out of their lives, out of their business. There is nothing There is nothing more invasive than government getting in between families and their doctors when making this difficult decision. So this bill won't save taxpayer dollars or create jobs, but it will undermine women's health, and it will hurt small businesses by penalizing them for offering their employees insurance plans that cover a full range of women's health care. This is a slap in the face of small businesses that are trying to take care of their companies, their employees, and their own families. It is also a slap in the face to any family that has to make the difficult decision to seek abortion care. As a daughter and wife of physicians, I am shocked that we would so quickly dismiss the judgment of our country's medical personnel and families in making the best decision to preserve the health and lives of their loved ones. We are wasting time on divisive issues while denying the real implications this will have on our families and economy. I urge my colleagues to join me in strong opposition to this bill.
Gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my colleague, Mr. Fortenberry from Nebraska.
Gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for the time. Madam Speaker, Americans deserve to know how the government spends their money, and they are right to refuse the use of tax dollars for highly controversial activities, in this case, abortion. Let me first make my own position clear. I'm pro-life, and I believe that women deserve better than abortion. But certainly we can all agree that the U.S. government should not take tax dollars from hardworking Americans to fund abortion. I believe it's really time we look at the reality of abortion, be honest, and see the choice for what it is. It is interesting to note that the early feminist movement recognized that abortion is a fundamental injustice. Abortion harms women. It takes the lives of children, and it allows a man to escape his responsibility. Abortion and the abortion industry so often profits from all of this pain. Abortion is also so often the result of psychological or physical coercion, or even emotional or physical abandonment. And this is a tragic social paradigm that has caused a deep wound in the soul of our country. No matter how difficult the circumstances, Madam Speaker, I believe we can and must do better as a society, and at a minimum, taxpayer dollars should not be involved. This issue has manifested itself again most intensely during the health care debate. Unless a prohibition is enacted, taxpayers will fund abortion under the framework of the new health care law. Madam Speaker, abortion is not health care. The House of Representatives recently voted to stop the use of taxpayer funds for abortions in the District of Columbia. So for decades, Congress has prescribed federal funding for abortion in this piecemeal fashion through the Hyde Amendment and other similar provisions in annual appropriations. It is time to settle this once and for all, as the majority of Americans wish. This bill will provide a comprehensive prohibition on the use of federal tax dollars, to fund the socially divisive issue of abortion. And it's time we stop. Thank you.
Gentlelady from New York.
Let me yield myself 30 seconds just to speak to something very important. H.R. 3 is actually dangerous for women's health. By refusing to provide any exceptions to women facing serious health conditions, cancer, heart, whatever that may be, you're forcing women to choose to risk their health or risk bankruptcy. And I think that's morally unacceptable. Under H.R. 3, a woman facing cancer who needs to terminate a pregnancy in order to live might have to go into debt over the $10,000 that legal and necessary procedure could cost. Despite having both health insurance and tax-preferred savings accounts, this bill would prevent her from having that. And I'm pleased to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, nurse Ms. Capps.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank my colleague for yielding, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to this rule and to the underlying legislation. A mere 2 weeks ago, the Republican majority brought us to the brink of government shutdown over their disapproval of Planned Parenthood. But instead of moving past divisive social issues and addressing our economic challenges with housing and creating jobs, we are here again today witnessing the Republicans' obsession with reopening the culture wars. H.R. 3 represents the most egregious attack on reproductive rights in over 35 years, rights that are protected by the Supreme Court decision. H.R. 3 uses the tax code to effectively deny access to insurance that includes abortion care coverage, no matter how it is paid for. What it doesn't do is trust our nation's women, trust our nation's families, their doctors, their clergy, and trust small businesses to make their own health care choices for their employees. This is unacceptable. Make no mistake, despite the rhetoric coming from the other side of the aisle, the bill is not about funding. It's about using our laws and our tax code to infringe upon the rights of women, the protected rights of women and families across this nation. Madam Speaker, it is time that this Congress places trust in our nation's women, its families, and small businesses to make their own health care choices. I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to my colleague from New Jersey, the author of H.R. 3, Mr. Smith.
I thank my good friend,
Mr. New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you for his leadership. Madam Speaker, America has changed, and today is more pro-life than ever. By ever-increasing majorities, especially among our young people, the mega-trend is to protect the child in the womb from the insidious violence of abortion and to protect women from the trauma, often lifelong emotional harm, from procuring an abortion. This paradigm shift, reflected in all the major polls, is a direct result of pro-life education, pregnancy care centers, pro-life laws including funding bans, informed consent and parental involvement statutes, the molding of consciences by the faith-based community, and advances in ultrasound that have shattered the pernicious pro-abortion myth that the baby in the womb isn't a human person or alive or of value. Even Planned Parenthood's abortion clinic director, Abby Johnson, was shocked into her new pro-life view by witnessing an ultrasound-guided abortion of a 13-week-old baby who was dismembered and pulverized in real time right before her eyes at that Texas clinic. But perhaps the greatest reason for the huge shift in public opinion in favor of life is the growing number of extraordinarily brave post-abortive women who deeply regret their abortions and today are silent no more. One post-abortive woman told a group outside the U.S. Supreme Court, and I heard her say it, that as she lay on the operating table, the abortionist laughed as he inserted a sharp knife into her womb and said, "Oh, it's trying to get away." Partially sedated, the woman immediately pleaded with the nurse and doctor to stop the abortion and to spare her child. They told her to shut up. Today she is deeply wounded by that cruel assault, that lethal assault on her baby. Dr. Alveda King, niece of the late Dr. Martin Luther King, has had 2 abortions. Today she has joined the growing coalition of women who deeply regret their abortions. Out of deep personal pain and compassion for others, they challenge us to respect, protect, and tangibly love both mother and child. The women of Silent No More give post-abortive women a safe place to grieve and a roadmap to reconciliation. And to society at large, and especially to Congress, these brave women compel us to rethink and to reassess the cheap sophistry of the abortion culture. Reflecting on her famous uncle's speech, the I Have a Dream speech, Dr. Alveda King asks us, how can the dream survive if we murder the children? Madam Speaker, there is no doubt whatsoever that ending public funding for abortions saves lives. Even the pro-abortion Guttmacher Institute in June of 2009 in a report said approximately 1/4 of women who would have had Medicaid-funded abortions if the Hyde Amendment didn't exist, instead give birth when this funding is unavailable. I vividly remember the late Congressman Henry Hyde being moved to tears when he learned that the Hyde Amendment had likely saved the lives of more than 1 million children who today are perhaps in school and getting ready for summer vacation, perhaps playing sports, or if they are in their 20s or 30s, building their own families. H.R. 3, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, comprehensively ensures that all programs authorized and appropriated by the federal government, including Obamacare, including the Hyde Amendment, do not subsidize the killing of babies except in the rare cases of rape, incest, and life of the mother. H.R. 3 ends the current IRS policy allowing tax-favored treatment for abortions under itemized deductions, HSAs, MSAs, and FSAs. H.R. 3 also ends the use of tax credits under Obamacare to purchase insurance plans that include abortions, except in cases of rape, incest, or life of the mother. Today we seek to end taxpayer complicity in abortion violence. No taxpayer should be coerced to pay, subsidize, or facilitate the dismemberment, the chemical poisoning, the starvation, and remember, that's how RU-46 works. It first starves the baby to death, then the other chemical brings on delivery of a dead baby, or the suctioning to death of a child and the harming of women. Regarding conscience rights, H.R. 3 protects pro-life health care entities from discrimination by state, local, and federal governments and empowers the courts with the authority to prevent and redress actual or threatened violations of conscience. The need for this protection is great. According to the Alliance of Catholic Healthcare, which represents California's Catholic health systems and hospitals, quote, California's Catholic hospitals operate in a public policy environment that regularly challenges the concept of conscience rights protections by attempting to coerce them and other health care providers to perform and can be complicit or pay for abortions. So I urge members to support this legislation. It is backed by 228 co-sponsors, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York.
Madam Speaker, I want to yield myself 15 seconds to put in the real Guttmacher what they have said. The claim that restoration of federal Medicaid coverage would result in a significant increase in the incidence of abortion nationwide is not supported by research, and extrapolating from Guttmacher's Medicaid findings to assert that coverage in the private insurance market is strongly linked to abortion incidence is entirely illegitimate. And I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
Gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I thank the gentlelady. Henry Hyde was one of the outstanding members of the House of Representatives in the history of the House of Representatives. He believed intently in a pro-life position. And the remarks that colleagues who supported this legislation are ones that I think Mr. Hyde would approve of. But he was also a master legislator, and he understood that other people have a different point of view than he has. And on the matter of abortion, something that is a matter of faith for many people, a matter of conscience for everyone, there are different points of view. The excellent job that Mr. Hyde did was to take direct taxpayer funding out of the equation. If there was going to be abortions, it was not going to be paid for by taxpayer dollars. This amendment takes it a radical step further. What it does is says that if there is any tax credit that is part of a health care plan, then this legislation would prohibit a small business from offering that health care plan to its workers. Now just think about the enormous burden that is being placed on hundreds, if not thousands, of small businesses in Vermont. I don't have enough time to yield, but thank you. Millions of small businesses in this country. Every one of those businesses where it offers a comprehensive health care plan to their employees that may include abortion services suddenly has to unravel those plans and deny that coverage to its workers. So what we have is an action by the sponsors of this legislation that would impose its will, far beyond what Mr. Hyde ever did or sought to do, on every small business in this country. By the way, there's another issue here, a precedent. If now we're starting to interfere with the use of tax credits, does this mean the next target is what kind of home you buy if you're going to get a use of a taxpayer deduction? Does it mean that if you're small...
Another minute.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
Okay, I thank the gentlelady. Does it mean technology that the tax credit is going to be restricted and dictated by a majority, whoever it happens to be, of this House of Representatives? The basic question for this Congress is whether we're going to allow the status quo to exist through the Hyde Amendment, where people can exercise their conscience on this important question, or are we going to have a dictation from this Congress that absolutely and completely prohibits people from making that own choice themselves. The mutual respect that Mr. Hyde understood we needed in this country is really going to be frayed with this legislation. So I would urge members to vote against this legislation. That's out of respect for the fact that there are sharply different views on this extraordinarily important question. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes and 15 seconds to my colleague from